My name is Rachel. I'm this week and 4 more weeks after this, intro to Excel. So really happy to have you all here. Our session today is going to be pretty hands-on. So I'm going to do some intro at the beginning to some Excel basics, and then the second half will be a chance for you all to do an activity, actually get a spreadsheet, get in there, do some stuff. I can walk around and help you all start to put into practice a bit. So that's kind of the plan. But before we do any of that, I thought I would just tell you all a little bit about why I am the one here teaching you Excel today. You can learn Excel from any online course, from YouTube, from Instagram, but why are you here learning Excel with me? And the reason for that is I have been using Excel in my career for many years at this point, and I currently work at a podcasting technology startup. So specifically, I'm the director of data and operations, and so in the sort of media tech space, advertising technology. And so what we'll be covering in this series is not only the technical skills that you need to know for Excel, navigating your spreadsheets, doing formulas, doing pivot tables, so not only the technical skills, but also some of the strategy or some of how to think about what are you trying to accomplish with using Excel for whatever your use case is. Why are you using a spreadsheet? Why are you doing this data analysis? So that's the lens that I'm trying to bring, hoping to bring to you also. Hopefully find that a little bit more valuable than a random YouTube tutorial. So that's why I'm here. A little bit about my sort of career path in data. I studied public policy in undergrad at the University of Chicago. I got really interested in kind of policy research, policy analysis, the data side of those sorts of things. Went to work in the nonprofit sector. Worked in a nonprofit for a few years. I was the best at using our database software at this nonprofit, and so that really got me into some more of the kind of data analytics, thinking about ways that we can be doing that in an environment with not a lot of resources, which is common in the nonprofit space, how we can be using data to actually make ourselves more efficient and be kind of doing better at that. Got really into that idea. Worked there for a few years, went back to school for my master's in computer science to get more into data. After that, I did some consulting with a large media company client, working on their advertising sales and database and sales process. It was a media company that I didn't feel super personally aligned with, so I took a different job here at USC Annenberg, actually, in 2020. Yeah, 2020, setting up a database that manages all the alumni data for the school and career planning, outcomes data, course data. All of that lovely stuff for you. Worked there for a bit, and then an opportunity to join this podcasting technology startup, which is where I'm working now. So I was our first data hire, and so that means that I wear a bunch of hats. I do data, everything from more technical data work, like SQL and Python and all of that. I'm actually going to be teaching a separate workshop on later this spring, if that's of interest. Seeing some nodding heads. Okay, great. So I do that. I also do plenty of spreadsheets. I also do our finances. I do our bookkeeping. I do some like chief of staff kind of stuff, strategy or advertising operations. I do a bunch of things. Company of fun people, which I like. And in almost every single one of those tasks, I use Excel. So hoping this will be a bit of a practical introduction for you all to get into it. So we're a relatively small group. I would love if we would maybe just take a quick moment and run around the room. I would love to just get a sense for people, maybe just your name, and then on a scale of 1 to 5, how often have you used Excel yourself so far? 1 is like almost never or never. 5 is like you're using it regularly, but maybe just not, maybe, you know, whatever your skill level is, but if you're using it regularly. So yeah, maybe we can just go around. We start here and maybe just tell me your name and your number. I'm just going to take steps.
My name is Jim. I think my level of using Excel is close to 5.
Great.
My name is Ruby, and I think my level is around 2.5.
Okay, cool. Back here. Okay, cool. All right, let's go maybe in the back over there. Cool.
I'm Alex, and then my level is probably like a 3, but I just need some touching up a little bit.
Totally. Cool. Over here. All right, cool.
Hello, my name is Christopher Luis, and my number for having used Excel before would be around 2.5.
Okay, cool.
My name is Derek Lane from the.
Okay, cool. Fantastic. All right. Great. Yeah, I think what's really cool about Excel is you don't need to know a lot in order for it to be really valuable for you, right? So knowing just a little bit gets you really far. It's kind of fun in that way. I think other sort of technical skills, the programming skills I'll be teaching later this spring, for example, there's a little bit more of a learning curve before it becomes useful. Excel useful almost right away. So I think many of us are kind of in the middle of this spectrum. I think you'll see a pretty quick turnaround on stuff you learn being useful and being able to use it right away. Great. All right, let's rock and roll. So I'd love to just hear from you all so far. So we've got some people with like sort of medium use of Excel. Where have you seen Excel or Google Sheets, any kind of spreadsheet? Just maybe like shout out some examples of where you've used them or where you've seen them. Yeah.
One of the requirements for our program communication management, we have to take like a 540 class.
Okay.
And then we use the spreadsheets to export to SPSS, and then we do analysis based on that.
Okay, great. So exporting from one system, putting into another system, super common. Yeah.
Yeah, so back in my like undergrad study, we learn like optimization techniques using Excel.
Ah, okay. So some statistical stuff. Is that,
Yeah.
okay, super cool. That's more advanced than we're probably gonna get to in this class. So that's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, I'm part of a finance club and we've been doing a lot of case studies. So just a lot of like financial Excel type things,
Yeah.
plugging in numbers and what formulas you have to do in order to like make sure all those numbers are correct and everything.
Yeah, that's a great, there's lots of financial use cases for Excel. One of the first ways I used it for finances was for my student loan calculations. Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Cool. So some kind of like ongoing processes, maybe you know the status of things. Organization, great.
To maintain quality of data. Information. Mail.
Cool. Qualitative data is another great example. I think when people think of Excel, you often think of numbers or finances or dollar amounts or invoices or anything like that. Lots of valid use cases there, but also a great way to use and analyze text data, do coding or categorization of information. Yeah, good stuff there. Okay, cool. So we've got a lot of examples that you all have seen, which is great. I'm going to talk about a few examples where I have used Excel in every kind of data analyst type of role I have been in. I have used Excel in my current role where I'm sort of our operations director. I use Excel for almost everything. I also use Excel for a lot of personal use cases. So even when I am job searching or applying for jobs, I have an Excel sheet that I'm using to track all my job applications, my progress, dates I've submitted things, when I've heard back, all of that. Previously, my first ever job, I was a cashier at a fabric store and I taught sewing lessons, which is a job that probably sounds like it has nothing to do with Excel, but I actually used Excel at that job also. Because the fabric store owner was trying to figure out if we should be open on Sundays. Were we making enough in sales to have it worth being open on Sundays? She asked me that question, and I figured out the answer via Excel. We're not going to be open on Sundays anymore. I also use Excel as a roommate. That was one of my most common use cases of using Excel when I shared an apartment with 3 other friends. We used Excel to figure out our splitting of expenses, who was going to submit the rent check and who was submitting the other utilities. And we had a formula to figure out who owed who how much money. I have a spreadsheet that I use every single week now to plan out my grocery lists and meal planning. So I say all of this because there's so many use cases for Excel. Organization of information, like you said over here, is a great use case. And there's so many times where you'll be in the workplace or just in your personal life trying to organize information, and you'll often get it in like a note or a document or maybe a PowerPoint deck of some kind. And just having the lens of, oh, this is something I could organize in a spreadsheet is going to put you ahead of folks who don't have quite as much exposure to Excel and similar tools. So just wanted to bring that up with some fun examples. Also because as well are here spending your afternoon on this gorgeous day inside learning Excel, clearly you all are kind of motivated to learn this stuff. Best way to learn it is to just practice. Practice is on your own stuff. So I'll give you some more suggestions for that at the end, but just think about stuff in your everyday life maybe it's a club you're involved with or a job, or just stuff that you've got going on personally. That's kind of the best way to practice, I guess, failure. All right, great. Let's talk a little bit more about some types of data. So because I work in podcasting, this is some of the types of data that I would be using for examples today and throughout this workshop. So just to kind of start to get some examples, types of information about podcasting, and I specifically work in technology around podcast advertising. Oh, it's just that screen. We came back. Okay, so these are some of the pieces of information that my company and I in my job organize in spreadsheets all the time. So for example, for a specific podcast, one chunk of information we have is each and every episode of that show. Right, so you think about every episode has its own piece of information related to it. It's got its own title. It's got however long it is in minutes and seconds. It's got the date it was published. It's got a description. It might have different artwork depending on the podcast app. Right, it's got all kinds of pieces of information related to it specifically. We have a database that stores all of this information for all of the shows that our company posts. But you can just scroll through your own Apple Podcast app and examples of that. We also, as a company, have data on every time someone downloads a podcast. So any sort of instance that someone like presses play or presses download on their app, we have a piece of data about that, including the time that it happened on, what kind of device, was it an iPhone, was it your web browser, etc. What was the location as far as your IP address, and which episode of the show did you download? Those are all pieces of information that we have. On the advertising side, very similar, right? So when you think about what are the different chunks of information in advertising, we have an ad campaign. An ad campaign has specific information about it as well. The brand, Nike or Home Goods or whatever company, start date, end date, the cost. This is the podcasting advertising terms, and you might know this. It's what CPM. It's the industry standard metric for pricing ads. It's a cost per 1,000 downloads. So if your podcast gets 10,000 downloads a month, you'll get ad offers that have a cost per 1,000 downloads associated. And so you'll divide your downloads by 1,000, multiply it by this price to sort of see how much you could make from that ad. And then so that's the deal. And then we've also got information about the audio of each ad. So every time you record an ad, if you're going to host an ad in your podcast, you're going to have an MP3 file. It's going to have maybe it's you recorded it yourself, maybe you got sent a pre-recorded one from the producer, maybe it's recorded straight into your MP3 file, maybe it's dynamically inserted as our digital video, and a lot of and also the length, so the 30-second ad, 90-second ad. Wait about 90 seconds, it's a long time before you're going to go back to your podcast. So these are some examples of information that we have, and these are some examples I'll be using throughout our workshop. All right, so the reason that I shared this is to kind of think about ways to sort of chunk out information, right? What are kind of the bigger chunks of information, smaller chunks of information? This might seem kind of basic, but we're going to come back to it in a second when we talk about the rest of this. I want to give you another example that's a little bit lighter. This is another kind of personal example. If you inventory your closet, think about your closet as data, which you can definitely do. You can think about your clothing, right? Each item of clothing has a bunch of attributes. Is it a shirt? Is it a pair of pants? Is it a dress? What color is it? What size? What brand? When did you purchase it? When did you last wear it? Right? These are all pieces of information that you can think about. And your closet has some data about it as well, right? How many drawers do you have? How many hangers? How many shelves? How many items of clothing fit in your drawers? All of those type of things are pieces of information in sort of a personal use case. The reason that this is kind of a fun way to practice is you can find out some fun information about yourself. For example, I inventoried every item of clothing that I had in my closet. Yeah, it was a little nuts. It was a little nuts. But it was very interesting because I now have this data about my closet, which says that 3.78% of my clothing is cardigans. Who knew? No other way to figure that out than to make a spreadsheet. I use this to figure out that I need to buy more jeans. Okay, so this is the type of thing that you can do with your own data. It's a little silly. It can be kind of fun to do for something that you're interested in. Maybe you want to inventory your bookshelf, your record collection, whatever you have. But it can be kind of a fun way to practice, and you can get some fun tidbits like that out of it using some of the tools we'll cover in this workshop. All right, so a lot of you have at least seen spreadsheets, worked with spreadsheets a little bit. So when we're thinking about doing your own work in a spreadsheet, either maybe creating a spreadsheet and inputting information, or when you're downloading a spreadsheet from somewhere or someone's emailing you a spreadsheet, the first thing you always want to think about is what do you want to see when you're getting a spreadsheet for someone. Usually you're getting a spreadsheet because you have a question, right? I had a question about my closet, which is, why do I not feel like I can make enough outfits with these clothes that I have? What am I missing? Okay, and that's what I figured out with the spreadsheet. So you always want to think about what question, if I'm creating a spreadsheet or preparing a spreadsheet for somebody else, what question are they going to have? And how can I make sure that it's clear what the answer is? So maybe their question is, how many students are enrolled in this workshop today? Maybe their question is, what are the names of all the students enrolled in this workshop today? Right, so whatever their question is, you always want to be thinking about that before you even open the file. You want to be able to kind of visualize an answer. What are they looking for and how am I going to answer it? A lot of people just dive right in and start like doing the spreadsheet, doing the formula and whatever. But you'll end up doing a lot of unnecessary work that way if you're not thinking about what. So these are a couple of questions that you should always be able to answer when you open a spreadsheet. If someone sends you a spreadsheet and you can't answer these 3 questions, it's not a very well designed spreadsheet. So this is the type of thing that if you're going to be collaborating with others, if you're doing research, if you're working with a team, working with your club, these are the types of questions that you can answer to make sure that your spreadsheet is actually going to do what it is. You should always be able to answer, what am I looking at? So if I've got a bunch of rows with names, are they students? Are they teachers? Are they prospective students, right? Who are these people? What's is there some clear labeling going on? There's going to be super clear about what you're looking at, what the source of this information was, right? So especially if you're downloading from maybe some database or some outside service, is it only covering a certain date range? Was it downloaded from a specific type of system? Maybe something that not the recipient won't have access to. You always want to explain what your sources are. And then for anything that's calculated, so anything that we're going to talk about formulas in this class, like some of you have interacted with formulas a little bit. So for any information that's calculated, how is it calculated? You want to make sure if someone sent you a spreadsheet, you would want to be able to see, okay, how'd you get this number over here? You know, how are you going to figure out, say you're doing finance stuff, right? How do you see that this is going to be my interest payment on this loan? You want to be able to clearly go back to, okay, I see it's referencing this cell, I see it's referencing this piece of information, the formula is clear, there's an explanation, all of that type of stuff. So this is all the stuff you want to think about before you even get into opening your program and doing anything technical with. All right. Okay, just a very quick note about Excel versus Google Sheets. Some of you might be wondering sort of about the difference. Most of the commonly used stuff that we're going to do in Excel, everything we're going to cover in this workshop can be done in Excel or Google Sheets. So for this kind of workshop that we're going to do, or the activity that we're going to do in Excel or Google Sheets, totally up to you. I think everyone has Excel through Annenberg. They're very similar. When you get into some of the more advanced features, there are some things that Excel can do that Google Sheets can't quite accommodate, but for the most part, they're very similar. Sometimes just where the things are in the menus and stuff are a little different. But feel free to use either. Same for Mac versus PC. I'm going to demo on a Mac because that's what I have. They're going to be very similar on PC, just things might be a little different. So when we get into that later, I can help if you have questions about where to find stuff. Okay. Ooh, that was my slide that I was going to delete and I didn't. So, okay. All right. We're going to get into sort of our main topic for today, which is, so today's our intro session. We want to be thinking about how do we get our information into a state where it can be used for the more advanced stuff, like formulas, like making a pivot chart, like making a table, like making a dashboard that I can monitor my progress. So I'm going to talk about what I think are the 3 most important habits for clean data. And the reason that we're spending a session on this is because there's a lot of kind of features of Excel that you can use to clean up and organize your data before you get into the analysis step. And that's going to make your analysis step go a lot smoother. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So our first sort of good habit is to divide things between sort of concepts, individuals or instances, and attributes. Okay, and so the setup in Excel is set up really well for you to kind of divide those things between sort of levels or sizes. So in our example from before, right, we're talking about data about podcasts, maybe your specific podcast. Anyone have a favorite podcast? I don't know how I built this, right? You know, whatever your favorite podcast is. each episode, right, episode 1, episode 2, they've all got titles, etc. All these different pieces of information. So the way that you want to store these in your spreadsheet is you want to have a sheet in your sheet. So it's, so those tabs at the bottom are a sheet. You would have that for your specific podcast. Then each row, so each individual thing should be in a row in that sheet. And then anything that's an attribute should have its own column. Okay, so you can think of these as those would be the title of the columns of your spreadsheet, and then the information would go across for each show. So if you get data that's not in this format, which is pretty common, there's some good tools in Excel to set that up, which I will demo in a bit. Okay, so that's one. First most important habit for clean data. Second most important habit for clean data is if it's a piece of information about the row, it should be in the row. Everybody with me? About the row goes in the row. It's very simple, but here's a very common example of the type of spreadsheets you might see. This is the spreadsheet that was emailed to me for a nonprofit I volunteer with. It's got people's names here, and then there's these rows that go across that indicate some sort of action that needs to be done with the rows underneath it. Now, the problem with this type of data is that when it's formatted like this, it's very stuck. It's going to be very hard to use for analysis because you can't sort of use Excel's built-in features. For example, let me show you this. All right. Okay. Here is the data that I collected from the beginning of our session today with everyone's name and Excel scores. I did my best guess on spelling. I apologize if I got it wrong. Okay, so here's my data, right? So I have on the right side of the room, everybody's name and score, and then on the left side of the room, everybody's name and score. Now, for a class, a very common thing that I might want to do is sort you all alphabetically by name, right? Very common. But when my data is set up like this, I can't, if I select this column and try to sort by name, I'm going to get stuck with these right side, left side, interspersed with your names. There's no student in here named left side. Okay. So this is a very simple example. This would be easy to fix, right? I would just delete, and do that. But if you get a bigger, more complicated spreadsheet like this one I was sent in this screenshot, it actually becomes much more of a manual pain. So so this is information about these people, right? The fact that y'all are sitting on the left side of the room, as I'm looking at it, stage left, whatever, that a piece of information is not in the row. So it'd be a much better technique to store this information is if I made another column over here that said side of room, okay? Room, and then I would put right for all of you, and then left for all these other people. And then spell, it's always fun to type in front of a full room of people. So if I'm storing my information this way, then I can use features like sort, like average, have all of my information in a way that I can easily move it around and also easily see for somebody else, right? You're thinking if I send the spreadsheet to somebody else, maybe they don't care if you all are sitting on the right or left side of the room. Maybe they want to see organized by score and kind of try to understand what is our students' experience level with Excel, right? So when you're thinking about who else am I sending it to, you want to make it as easy as possible for somebody else to manipulate. Make sense? All right. Okay. We'll put this over here. Ooh, okay. Sorry, still learning how this projector thing works. Okay. Okay. Moving on. Okay, so that's our second habit for good data. If it's about the row, it needs to be in the third most important habit, third of three most important habits for clean data is that you should, whenever possible, you should aim to store a piece of information one time and then reference that piece of information. So it's pretty common that you'll see a spreadsheet that got a bunch of information and maybe in one tab, and then someone started another sheet where they copy pasted some of it, and then they maybe started, right? The reason that we want to store information once and reference it is because spreadsheets have really powerful tools built in to use formulas on information, right? So if you are going to change a piece of information, formulas automatically update everything else. If you copy pasted stuff into another place, you're not using formulas, whatever, and you're storing the same piece of information in multiple places, you're going to have to go back and update it in multiple places, right? So here's an example, very simple example. Maybe you have a spreadsheet that's got your price, your number of items, and then your total amount, which is just the price times the number of items, right? Super simple. In this case, I looked at my price, I looked at my number of items, I was like, I can do some quick mental math. 5 times 25, 125. I typed in 125 to this box. Great, done. However, if I want to update my number of items to 6 items, then I'm going to have to go here and say, okay, the 125 isn't accurate anymore. I would first need to catch that. I might not catch that in my spreadsheet. And then I'd have to do the math again and then type in 150 here. The purpose of a formula is to allow you to use this concept of store information once and reference it. So instead of sort of storing this number, sort of like storing the idea of 5 items at this price, a formula is going to allow you to reference and say, okay, I'm going to set up the logic that is, this should always be the items times the price. I can set that up here and then it's always going to be correct. If I change this to 6 items, if I change the price, whatever, it's always correct. That's a very simple example, but this is a really important concept that'll make your spreadsheets work a lot smoother. Okay, those are 3 kind of most important habits for clean data. Anyone have any questions about any of those? Okay, great. All right, so we are going to move into the activity portion of this session. So I have a data set for you all at this link right here. I tried to make it short for y'all to type in. So we're going to do a couple things. You're going to download this data and we're going to try to clean it up. So your task, should you choose to accept it, is to sort of clean up this file in alignment with those 3 good habits that we just talked about. So first thing is are dividing between sheets. Concepts go in sheets, individuals go in rows, attributes go in columns. So you want to look at this data set and think about what you can do with the add campaigns to sort of separate those out principle. All right, about the row, in the row. Okay, so you want to be thinking about, are there places where I can move, do that fix that I just mentioned. You want to check for any duplicates. I'll show you how to do that. You'll need to do some visual cleanup, right? Make sure that everything's sorted by name. The top row is frozen so that you can scroll easily. And then we're going to do a simple formula. We'll talk a lot more about formulas in the next session of this workshop, but we're going to do a simple formula, which is calculated with an add based on this DPM. So the simple formula, I'll show you that as well as we go. But this is related to our good habit number 3, which is to store that piece of information just once and then reference. All right, so what I'm going to have you all do is download, go to this link, grab, put it up in Excel, Google Sheets, whatever you prefer. And then we're going to start working on actually putting those habits on that sheet. Okay, cool. Give you all a moment to do that. Yes, great question. Typically what you want to do with the CSV is you want to open it up in Excel or in with numbers or Google Sheets or whatever. And then you can save it. The reason you want to do that, so CSV, great question. CSV stands for comma separated values. That's a really common way, especially if you're exporting data from some database and you're importing it into another system, you're going to get into CSV. If you save something as a CSV, you won't be able to use all of the features of Excel, like the formulas and the pivot charts and the multiple sheets and all of that. That stuff won't always save correctly if it's still saved. So your best bet, it's in some cases will work to just change the extension in your file editor, but in general, I recommend just popping it open and then doing a save as file.
Exporting now.
Cool. All right, so I'm gonna give everybody a second to get the file downloaded, get started on some of this. Once you all get going a little bit, I'll share a copy up here and work through it a little bit as well. But I want to give you all a chance to try it out first. So pop that open, give these a try. And if you get stuck, let me know and I will help. Yes, great. So go ahead and do some. Okay, cool. So you got it out. Yeah.
I'm a bit confused.
Yeah. Okay.
As I'm currently doing first step, I start. Do I have campaigns right?
Yeah.
You also add them.
Yeah, great question. Okay, so this piece of information mainly shows, right? And so we want to keep it, so because that's a different concept, we want to put that in. So this whole thing is your workbook. And your different sheets are your tabs at the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
So I would start by, right there, make a new tab, maybe label it something helpful, and then move your add campaign info over to there. So what you'll notice about these, for example, is so we've got McDonald's, March 1st, we've got Nike, but then we've got McDonald's, March 1st again, right? So we're storing a bunch of information there. So it's helpful to know which shows are in the McDonald's campaign, right? Let's say McDonald's reschedules to April. Now you got to change that date in like 7 places. in here, right? So you want to think about how could you organize it so that you can have the date and the date and then campaign participation separately.
Got
Make
it.
sense?
Yes.
I literally told him.
Right, so what you want to do here is make sure that we've got all of our concepts, generation, for individuals, rows, and our attributes, our columns. So when we start, what is look at our. Okay, so a couple people are confused about getting started with the attributes. In your data sheet, which I think I have open over here. Yes, do like a preview thing, yes. Okay, so let me zoom this in the table. All right, so this is the sheet y'all are working with. So what you've got here is a bunch of different podcasts. These are all fake podcasts. This is all fake data. Okay. I don't know if you guys figured that out from the nonsensical names. Okay, and then over here, we've got information about our ad campaign. So these are campaigns that these shows might be participating in. Now, this is the sheet currently is kind of violating our first good habit principle, which is that there's information about the campaign and its start date, stored multiple times, and it's kind of two concepts being stored on the same sheet. So the reason that that's not a good principle in this case is if you look at one of these campaigns, say Nike May 1st, and you'll see there's a bunch of shows in this Nike May 1st campaign, right? Makes sense. Let's say Nike reschedules to June. What do you got to do in this current sheet? You got to update Nike June. You got to update this one to say Nike June. You got to update this one to say Nike June, right? You've got to change it in a bunch of places. You're gonna run into data quality issues. Okay, so what you want to do here is say, okay, we still want to know that this show art content. We still want to know that they're in the DoorDash campaign. That's helpful. But we want to have a separate place where we're storing, okay, what is each campaign and what is its start date, right? We want to be doing that because that's a different concept. That's where we want to have it in a different sheet with this piece of information at just the one time. So that in case we ever need to update the month that the campaign is running in, we can just do it in the one place. And then it's sort of applicable to all of them. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's kind of a couple of tools we can use for this section. Let me put my other window up here. Open, yes I do. Okay, so right screen. Okay, so here are my campaigns. So first thing I would do is I'm like, okay, these are campaigns. These are some different information. I'm going to copy them over. And I said, some of you already figured this out. I'm going to copy them over to a new sheet, right? They're so aligned with my principle. Always good to name these sheets something useful, especially thinking about if you're going to send the sheet to somebody else. So I'm going to call them ad campaigns. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. I'm going to grab my campaign info. I'm going to do a copy paste and stick it over here. Okay, so now I've gotten started. So now what I want to do is think about, okay, how can I make sure that each attribute is stored in its own column? So what attributes do I have stored in this column right now about these campaigns? Name and date. Excellent. Okay, so I've got two attributes, one column, not useful. So what you want to do with these is get these split out into multiple columns. Now, there's two ways you could do this. One way you could do this is you could look at this and you could say, okay, this is DoorDash. And then this one is April 1st, and then type in April 1st over here and do that all the way down, right? That's one thing you could do. Yeah, I see some faces that doesn't look very fun. No, not fun. So you can use instead a built-in Excel tool to do this for you, which I will show you. Does anyone already know what the tool is for this? Okay, this is a very helpful one to use in this first step of sort of cleaning up your spreadsheet. It's called text to data. So what you do for this is you're going to select your column. I'm going to go over here in my data and I'm sorry, text to columns. So under the data tab in your ribbon, it should be text to columns. If you're on a PC, it should be in a similar place that can help you find it. Text to columns. Okay. So what this is going to let you do is it's going to say, okay, we've got our name, we've got our date. We're going to split them sort of using some logic. So in this case, what's between our date and our brand, our label? We got a little dash in there. Great, we're going to use that. You'll often have things where it's like a first name, last name, there's a space in between, or there's an email address with the @ symbol in the middle, and you're trying to separate out the username, anything like that. You can use this tool. All you need to do for this, so this is just telling you to choose delimited, which will be the most common option that you choose. And then you could say, okay, what's delimiting my data? What's separating my data? And you could just type that in here. So it might just be a comma or a space, which you can grab. Or in this case, I'm going to say a dash. Now, what's cool about this is going to preview to me what it's going to do when it splits on the dash, which is split my columns just how I want them, right? DoorDash, and then April 1st, 2024. I'm going to do that, finish, and then look at that. I've got my data separated out into 2 places. Now, this is a little bit messy, right? I got a lot of blanks. I've got McDonald's repeated several times in here, right? So this still isn't following my data principle of storing every piece of information once that I'm trying to get to. So next thing I'm going to do here is use another one of these tools to remove my duplicates. Now you could remove the duplicates manually, right? You could go through and say, okay, I see this one's twice. I could like come in and delete the row. You can do that. There's a faster way. So what you'll do for this, I'm going to give this column a date. Let's call it, or this column a name. Let's call it start date. Next thing I'm going to do is come in here and remove my duplicates. So again, under your data tab up here, you've got a built-in tool for this, which is pretty awesome. So this is going to give you some options. First option it's going to give you is whether you have headers or not. So you should always have headers in your data. That's just a public service announcement. If your data doesn't have headers, you should close this window, add headers, come back to it. And then you're going to tell it which column has duplicates. So this is important because this is how it's going to decide whether something is a duplicate. So for example, if we had a McDonald's campaign starting in March and a McDonald's campaign starting in April, then just getting rid of our McDonald's duplicates wouldn't help us because we've got multiple dates that they're falling under. Does that make sense? In this case, we see that we've just got one campaign per date. So I'm just going to say that my duplicates are only in this first column, column A. You can tell it's column A because you got your ABC up here. I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to go through and remove all those duplicates. And most importantly, it's going to tell me how many duplicate or how many values remain, which is super handy. So you can see that we had a bunch. So we have the 493 means we had 493 shows participating in these 7 different campaigns, the running big campaigns, but we've only got 7 left. Now, what are my 7? My 7 are DoorDash, McDonald's, Quip, Blank, Hilton, Nike, Macy's. So I got a blank row left over. This is what, when you do your remove duplicates, if you had blanks in there, you'll always get a blank value. Usually easiest to just delete it. But the reason you want to delete it is so that you can make this sortable. So for example, just delete this row. You can do right click, control click on a Mac. And then I can do some sorting over here. So I could sort by date or by campaign. Anybody know how to sort? Yeah? Up here, how do we sort?
Clicks within function sort, and then you choose a column based on like letters A to Z.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So I'm going to select my data. You can do Command A or I think it's Control A on a PC. I'm going to come over here and do my sort and filter. It's got a few built-in options. I can just go A to Z or Z to A. These also work on numbers. So these don't just work on the alphabet. If you have numerical data, it'll work for these as well. But I can just do that and it'll sort automatically. Now you got to watch out for these automatic ones because they're going to grab your header. So in this case, it moves my header to the bottom. So what I would usually recommend for sorting, if you want to sort, is come over here and actually hit filter. And that's going to give you these fun little arrows at the top, which you can then sort by any piece of information that you want. So you can sort your names, ascending, descending, whatever, and it's going to respect your headers. All right, everybody following along? Anyone's advertiser tab not look like this yet? Yeah.
I missed.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, so we did the duplication before, so that's
Yeah.
totally fine. You can do it in either order. So all you want to do, is select undo. Perfect. All right. So for this one, you're going to select this column. Okay. This is good. So when you drag the corner like that, it's going to copy any sort of formatting or formula that you have. So you want to just do shift, and then shift. Oh, yeah. You can also just select the partial. So then you're going to go data columns. Yeah, delimited, that, and then you have to put your what that is perfect, and you'll know you're right.
Yes.
Right. Okay, cool. Right. Yeah.
Sorting.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what you're in one is it looks like you got your headers sorted in there previously, right? So that makes sense. So there's some candy bars and data has headers. You always want to make sure it's back. Now the issue is now those things the header. I would do go back to the header.
One's on top too. What could I do with the two?
Oh, so I would insert a new row up there. So if you select your row one, you got two. And then select all that and then sort of. Yeah, so go. And here, give people arrows. Yeah, not bad. You got your headers already. I like figured out the headers. Exactly. Things. Yeah. All right. How are we doing? Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Any other questions about separating out data? Okay. So next thing we want to do is go back to this tab and maybe do a little bit of cleanup of this, right? So we want to know that this show is in this campaign, but we don't necessarily need the date here anymore, right? We've got our dates over here. They're good. This is super clean data. This will be easy to work with. If I know that a show is in the McDonald's campaign, all I would need to do is hop over here and see what date McDonald's is at. Super easy. Next week, we'll also go through some formulas for how I could pull that information into the same view, but I've got it in one place. That's the most important part we're setting up. So if I want to clean these up, so I just have the name of the campaign and not the date, what tool am I going to use for that?
You're gonna use your text to column.
Exactly, you're going to use your text to columns again. So what you'll learn with Excel is there's a pretty small number of tools that you'll use frequently, and you'll just use them for a kind of a bunch of different use cases. That's the most common way that you'll use it in your kind of day-to-day work. So I just use text to column cleanup on this other tab. I'm going to do the exact same thing on this tab. That's going to be a theme. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to do my data tab, or I think this is called a ribbon, data ribbon up here. Text to column, and I'm going to do my same thing. It's going to remember whatever settings I gave it last time. So in this case, I got it. We're good to go. It already has my little dash. Next. Boom. Okay, it's going to separate out all my dates. In this case, I don't want the dates in this tab anymore because I already have them in my other sheet. We already set that all up. So now that they're all separated, I'm just going to delete them. Easiest way to delete a column is you select at the top, and then do your right click or control click and just delete. So it clears it all the way down. Any questions about that?
The select all thing that you did,
Yes.
I'm just like scrolling down.
Yeah, okay, that's a great question, especially in this sheet, right? Because we've got like 500 shows in here. So easiest way to select all when you're in a chunk of data is to do Command A if you're on a Mac, or I think it's Control A if you're on a PC, and that's going to select everything. Now, you do want to watch out because if you have any blank rows in your data, if you do Control A, it's only going to go up to your first blank row and then it'll skip anything below it. So you can also do Control A a second time, and that'll get, so do it once, do it again right after, that'll get your whole entire sheet. So something to watch out for if you have blank rows.
Yeah, I did it the first sheet.
Nice. Yeah, also sometimes if you're like over here, like not in a block of text, it'll just grab everything just to be safe. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
We comment X. I quite
Ooh, okay.
the campaign, so it's your annual.
Okay, great question. So that's a common thing that happens with data files, right? You're like moving stuff around, make a mistake. What I would do in this case is, did you change any of the order of any of this tab, any of the shows?
Yeah.
Okay, they're all in the same order. Great. So if I were you, I would go back to that link. I would download another copy, paste it right back in.
Okay.
Boom. If you need the link again, let me know. That's another great point though. So when you're, especially when you're downloading data from somewhere else, or you're downloading it from multiple systems, it can be great to save a copy before you do any edits. Just save a copy and call it like raw data version or something like that. Save it, do another save as, title it your actual thing, go through and do all of your cleanup steps like this. And then if you missed anything or you accidentally cut, paste, or delete something by accident, you can go back to your raw data with having some version scroll going on. The one thing that you want to do for papers and essays and stuff, I used to save mine, it's like version 7. I was like, I delete that one sentence that was so genius, I might never get it back, All right, how we feeling? Doing good. Okay. Next thing we want to check for. So we've covered our data principle number 1 here, which is kind of putting our concepts in our sheets, our individuals in our rows, our attributes in our columns. Okay, so we've got some cleanup going on. Next thing we would want to do is make make sure that anything that's about the row is in the row. So let's go take a look at our sheet again. So this is a pretty good sheet, actually. It's a pretty good sheet. We got our name, our first name, last name, email. We got a podcast title. So presumably this is the host of our podcast, right? We've got our podcast title, got the number of downloads per month that this podcast gets. we've got their content category, we've got their CPM, which is their cost, right? And then the ad campaigns, which we just all dealt with. So this is a great example of a sheet that already has everything about the row is in this sheet. If we had gotten one that said like true crime and then had 7 shows listed and then business in a new row and then had 10 shows listed, right? Then we would want to do the cleanup that we've done before, but we're actually already set with this one. The one other piece of cleanup I would do is because you know that this CPM is a price, right? CPM is cost. You would want this to show up in dollars or whatever your currency unit is that you're using. So for that, we're going to do some simple formatting. Back over to our sheet here. So from your home tab, you can select any of your columns and apply formatting to them from this option right here. And this will help you format your info however you want. So for example, in this case, I would want to say that this is currency. And since it's set to US, it's going to default to dollars. You can change it to whatever. And everything will show up with a dollar sign. The reason that this is super helpful goes back to our initial 3 questions that we were talking about before we talked about anything about data. If you send the spreadsheet to someone, they want to know what are they looking at. Somebody might not know what CPM is, right? I certainly didn't before I learned what it was. And so if something has dollar signs in here, I'm going to be able to immediately tell that it's something about money. It's some sort of price information. That's really helpful to me as the viewer. So when anytime you're putting together a spreadsheet, you always want to be thinking about where can I format, where can I sort of provide context? Can I make sure all my columns have titles, they're descriptive, all of that good stuff so that somebody else could actually absorb this information. Cool. Okay, let's go back here. Next thing we want to do is check for any duplicates. This is something that is often not going to be explicitly mentioned to you anytime you're working with data, but it's going to come up often. So if I go back to my sheet, I would want to make sure that all these shows are listed just once to align with our principles that I mentioned before, right? I'm storing every piece of information one time. I wouldn't want to have the same show listed in here twice because let's say the host updated their email address, then I've got to update it in multiple places, right? So I want to make sure I've got it updated just once. Now, when you have a short data set, you can just scroll through and be like, okay, I don't see anything that is the same. Great. In this case, there's 500 of these. And so your eyes would like glaze over a little bit if you tried to do that by yourself. So there's a few different tools you can use to do this. We did a kind of a removing of all of our duplicates here because we could see that there were a bunch of duplicates. So we just did our data and we did our remove duplicates tool. That works great. If you definitely know there are duplicates, you know exactly how to remove them. That works fine. The other thing, the other tool that exists for checking for duplicates is if you need to do a little bit more of a visual check. You're like, I think there might be duplicates, but I don't know. And I would want to like look at them, right? There could be 2 podcasts with the same title, but I would want to look at them and make sure like with my brain, with my eyes that they're the same thing, right? So in that case, what I'm going to use is a different tool called conditional formatting. So I'm going to select all my data, which is Command A over here, do conditional formatting. My first option, highlight cells. So this is something that you can use to kind of apply a color to various cells in your sheet. I want to highlight duplicate values. Okay, and then you can pick your color. I'm just going to go with the default red for the purposes of this. Okay, we got a bunch of duplicates going on here. It's looking for duplicates in each each cell, right? So it's checking each cell. Does that cell exist anywhere else in all of these cells? Now, I'm seeing a bunch of duplicates in this category column. That's fine, because we're going to have a bunch of shows in the same category. Yeah.
It's conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, and then what do we?
Duplicate values.
Oh, got it.
Yep. Nice. And you can select whatever color. So these duplicates, totally fine. We got duplicates in our CPM column. Some shows are sold at the same price. That's also fine. A bunch of shows in the same ad campaign. We already know that there's a bunch of shows in the same ad campaign. That is also totally fine. Over here, we got some names. We got some first names, last names that are the same. Okay, but I'm not seeing any duplicates in my emails or in my show titles. So this is the case where I might just do like a quick visual check. I'm just gonna like scroll through and be like, all right, did any of my emails, show titles get highlighted? They did not. Great. The other quick way I could check that, just to eyeball them, would be to sort them by color. And you can sort by color the same way that we just sorted by alphabet. So I'm going to select all these guys here. in my home ribbon, I'm gonna go over to sort and filter, and I'm gonna hit filter, so I get my little arrows. And once I get my little arrows, you can sort and filter by color, right? So I can hop in here, color none. It's not even giving me any options to do this one because there's no cells that got colored red. If I went over here to my CPM and I said I wanted to sort by color, it would let me pick by these ones that are rose colored filled in, and I could take a look, eyeball those duplicates and say, okay, these are the ones that are being sold at the same price. That's fine. Price isn't an area that we care about duplicates. Make sense? Anytime you apply a filter, you can just come in here and do clear filter, and it'll bring back all your info. All right, how are we doing on our habits? Okay, so we covered our first two habits. We're going to do a little bit of other cleanup. We removed our duplicates. Next thing we want to do is make this easy for somebody else to navigate, right? So we want to sort by name and freeze the top row. What is freezing our row? Let's take a look at that. So anytime you're in a spreadsheet that has a bunch of rows and you've scrolled down, by the time you get down here, what is this column? Anyone remember? I don't remember either. We got to scroll back 100 rows and see what the header of it was called, right? That's not super handy. This is where this is a great feature to do anytime you're sending a sheet to somebody else, is you can freeze your rows. So depending on how your data is set up, you might want to either freeze your top row or freeze your first column. All that's going to do is make it, let's see, I'm going to freeze my top row in this case. When I scroll down, I can still see what my column titles are. Super handy, super helpful, especially if you're doing something really detailed. In some cases, I might have had my names in my first column and I might have wanted to freeze the column instead. Just kind of depends on if you have more rows than columns or vice versa. All right. Next thing I'm going to do as far as cleanup, make this easy for somebody else to get through, is make sure they can read all the information that's in here. So what I want to do is make sure that all my columns are the right width. Super basic, but I just want to make sure that people can read what are my headers, what are all the pieces of information. Now I could go through each column and like drag my little slidey thing and like kind of squint at it and be like, okay, does the longest email fit in there? You can do that. The other cleanup tool you can use for this, which is super handy, in your home ribbon, you can hop over here to your format and you can auto fit column width. This is one of my favorite features for making a sheet that looks a little messy or hard to read. Be super clean and tidy. So from your home ribbon, you're going to go over here to format, and then you'll see a few format options. You can auto fit row height. So if you've got like blocks of text in each row, you can do that. But in this case, I'm going to do my column width, and it's going to do this super nicely for me. Not only does it make my title column a lot wider, so it's accommodating whatever the longest title is in this list, it also made my other columns smaller. My CPM with just dollars, it squished a bit, right? Super handy, super nice touch for keeping your data easy to read for somebody else. Now, since I don't care about these duplicates that we had highlighted before, I'm gonna go back and remove my conditional formatting. So under your conditional formatting where we did before, you can go either just like clear, remove any rules that you applied. So our duplicate highlighting rule is a rule. If you had a bunch of them, you could go to manage and get a list. I'm just gonna clear these from here so that nothing's highlighted anymore, because I kind of am done with that. Yeah.
So you gotta, why do you go to format as table?
Great question. No, you're gonna go a little bit further over.
Format,
Yep.
and then auto fit, which one?
Column. Yeah, so yep, you can use either one. In this case, my rows are already all the right size, so I'm good to go. And let's say we had another column in here that was like podcast description, and it was like a paragraph for each podcast. In that case, I might use the row height so that you could read the whole paragraph in each row.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, yeah, yes. So you're gonna do your Command A, Control A to select everything. You're gonna go back to your conditional formatting, so same place you were when we did it. But then you're going to go down here and you can either go to clear rules and just remove everything, or if you go to manage, it'll show you a little list of all the things that you have set to highlight, and you can delete them from there. Yeah, good question. Okay, here's another reason that conditional formatting is super handy, and that little list of rules that just popped up is helpful. Going back to our initial 3 questions, right? When you hand somebody a spreadsheet, what do they want to know? They want to know what they're looking at, and they want to know if you calculated anything, how did you calculate it? Right? If you use conditional formatting, you make your logic really clear. For example, let's say that I want to highlight any of the shows here that are going for the highest CPM. They're selling their ads at the highest rate. They're probably going to bring in the most revenue. So I could use conditional formatting here, not just to highlight duplicates, but to highlight by other rules as well. So you can highlight, for example, anything that's above a $30 CPM. For example, I could say greater than and look at my $30. Or I could say, I just want to know what my top 10 highest CPMs are. So in that case, I'm going to come in here and I just want to apply this to my CPM column. So I'm just going to do my CPM and I want to know what are my top 10 by CPM. And I'm going to highlight those green because green is the color of money. Okay. All right. Just checking to make sure that everyone's listening. Okay. So now I've got my cells highlighted in green for my top selling shows. I could also, right, come in here and use my little filter to sort them by price. Ascending is going to go low to high, descending is going to go high to low, and you'll see it puts all the green ones together. When I have this view sorted, it's really easy to see that it's just the top 10 by CPM. But if I go back and have them sorted, say by title, like I did before, it's a little harder to tell why this random one is green, right? If somebody emailed you the spreadsheet and like this, it's got this little green bit here, you'd be like, why is this green, right? So conditional formatting is a great tool that you can use to say, okay, I want to know what conditional formatting has been applied. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to hit manage rules, and then I can see what rules somebody applied. I can see that they highlighted the top 10. That's great because now somebody else can understand what you did. You could not use conditional formatting. You could just sort like we did before, just select these cells and just color them green using the regular like green color, tool. You could do that, but nobody would be able to trace back what you did, right? So conditional formatting is a great way to show that. Yeah.
Sure, again, how can we click into the green and then see what is the condition?
Yeah, exactly. So any column that has conditional formatting or you think it might have conditional formatting and you want to check, you just select it. You're still in your home ribbon, you go to your conditional formatting, and then you go to manage rules down here. Did Excel just die on me? Oh, Excel crashed. We love that. Didn't handle it. All right. All right. How are we doing? Examples, this. Okay, cool. Now this is fun. It didn't save any of my changes that I made in the last few minutes. Okay, great. So what is this error that I'm getting? Workbook cannot be saved because it contains multiple sheets. This is the issue I was saying about CSVs. This is why you why you should always save your thing as an Excel file before moving on if you get it as a CSV, because I've added this extra sheet down here. CSV files don't support this extra sheet. So now anytime I try to save this, I'm going to get this error until I do my save as and actually save it. Just over here. Until I do my save as and actually save it as an Excel file. And clearly I should have done that because it crashed and lost all my stuff. So I'm just gonna go in here and do Excel. Sometimes if you're exporting data from other systems, you'll get XLS, which is this like old Excel format from 20 years ago. Oh my God, 2004. So if you get anything in XLS, I would definitely always recommend saving it as XLSX. It'll still work probably, but it'll get a little glitchy on you. So you should always save it as XLSX. Okay, how we doing? We good? Okay, so next thing we want to do, let's take a look at how we're doing on our tasks here. Okay, we froze the top row, we sorted by name. Okay, so we got a pretty clean like sheet so far, right? We got a sheet that would be like pretty easy for somebody else to come and navigate. So next thing we want to do is get started with a basic formula. Okay, this is our kind of our last chunk of information that we want to add to this sheet. Calculate the monthly cost of an ad for each show. So the way that we calculate our monthly cost of an ad is if we look at each of these. Let me get rid of my conditional formatting here. It's distracting me. So I'm going to go to my manage rules and I'll subtract, which will get rid of that rule. Okay. All right. Got that out of the way. And I don't want to do my rows again because I can't. Okay, great. Is it in auto recovery mode? Let's just go do my title. Okay. Email and title. If you double click right between columns, it'll do the auto fit for one column. I'm just going to do that because it's in auto recovery right now. Okay, next thing I want to do is add my CPM formula. So what is my formula for an ad? So in this case, I'm going to look at my two pieces of information here, monthly downloads for this show, and then the cost of an ad per 1,000 downloads. So if I'm going to sell an ad that gets inserted into every single download of this show at this rate, how much money would this show make from that ad campaign? It's a question I'm trying to answer right now. So what I could do is I could do the math on my calculator or on a napkin or whatever, find out the answer and type it in here, but we're not going to do that because that's a principle of that would be storing our information multiple times and not referencing. So what we're going to do is do a simple reference. So first thing I'm going to do is add a header for this column. I'm going to create a new column because this is a new attribute. This is a new piece of information about this show. So I'm going to make a new column. And I'm going to label it something handy. I'm going to label it, let's say, monthly ad revenue. Spelled revenue correctly. Looks like I did. Okay, great. Monthly ad revenue. Okay, so now I want to do a formula referencing those two fields. So anytime you're going to do a formula, you're always going to start by typing in an equal sign, and that's going to be the signal to Excel that you're going to do a formula. And then you can just use the same simple math operators that you use for any other basic math. So plus, minus, star, slash, just like you would type any other basic math stuff on your computer. It works just fine in Excel. So in this case, I'm going to follow this formula. So I'm going to use my arrow keys and go over to my CPM. And then I'm seeing it's kind of highlighting that cell. It's saying H2. It's getting the H from the column, 2 from the row. So that's my CPM. That's my reference. Then I'm going to just type my asterisk character on my keyboard. So I'm getting my CPM times my monthly downloads. It's the next piece of information I want. So same deal. Just going to go over my arrow keys to my monthly downloads. And now I'm seeing I'm getting CPM times monthly downloads. Great. Working on my formula. It's starting to match here. And the last thing I need to do is divide by 1,000 because CPM is cost per 1,000 downloads. So I got to divide my downloads by 1,000. I'm just going to do my slash and type in 1,000 on my keyboard, 3 zeros. When you're done typing in a formula, you always want to hit enter, return on your keyboard. And then I'm going to get my piece of information. Now, this is what's super helpful about formulas. So you'll see in your sheet here, right, we got a dollar amount. We got $5,000. That's great. I wouldn't mind having $5,000 a month to run, a DoorDash ad. Awesome. So I've got my dollar value there. But if you look up in the top here, this is called your formula editor. Up in the top, you don't see that same number. You see the logic. You see how it's being calculated. This is super helpful because if you send this sheet to somebody else and they're like, how'd they get that monthly revenue number? They can just put their little cursor right here and see how you did that, right? Super valuable. Same thing, if you get a sheet, you want to be able to figure that out, kind of reverse engineer it. Okay, so we've got this formula for one of our shows, but we want to know this for all of our shows. So what we want to do next is copy this all the way down. Now, what you could do is you could do Command copy on your keyboard, Command paste on your keyboard, right? And I could slowly paste it down. That's going to be a little annoying. So the other thing that you can do is when you grab the little corner of your cell right here, if you drag, it's going to copy any logic that it was using before. Sometimes that happens when you're just trying to select and it can be a little confusing. I think that happened over here earlier. But if you drag, it's going to copy. And same thing, if you just double click on that little corner, it's going to fill in all the way down your data, save you a little bit of scrolling. Okay. Now, what's handy about this, again, is it gives you a way to troubleshoot. So you can come in here and you can say, okay, on my first row, it's doing H2 times F2 divided by 1,000. Great, I'm all in row 2, that makes sense. Here it's doing H3 times F3 divided by 1,000 because I'm in my row 3. And if you check this for any row on the way down, you'll see that it is on the correct row. It's also a good way to troubleshoot if you think your number looks off, it might somehow be grabbing the wrong row, and you can correct it. How are we doing on the formula? Everybody got their formula working? Okay, great. All right, cool. That is the last item on this checklist. Okay, let's look at a couple other things. So what did you notice about this data as we were going through this? Any data that was messy or missing?
It's for the monthly.
Great. Excellent observations. So some of our monthly downloads are missing, some of our CPM numbers are missing. And so for those, when it's trying to calculate its revenue, this one has a lot of downloads, but it's showing a $0 revenue. And then this one has no downloads, but a CPM listed. And so it's not going to show any dollars here. So it's always really important to look at your missing data. It's pretty common to get missing data from downloading it from a system, getting it from somebody else, whatever piece of information that you're missing. It's important to think about how you're going to handle that. There's a few different ways you can think about that, and then that'll change what you're going to do in Excel. So for example, let's say I wanted to figure out my average among all these shows, what's going to be their average monthly ad revenue. We're going to get more into formulas next week, but just as a preview, I'm just going to hop over into a random cell over here. I'm going to do equals. I'm going to do a different formula for average. And then I'm just going to select this whole column right here. And it's going to pop out with an average for me. Great. Okay, so the average is what is that, like $7,000 for monthly cost of an ad. Now, the issue is that this average is averaging in these zeros. And this is clearly just a data error, right? If a show has like 200,000 downloads a month, they must have a price somewhere. I just don't have it, or something was wrong when I exported it or something, right? Clearly something is missing and this isn't actually a zero, but this average is taking those zeros into account. So this is the type of thing that you always want to be looking for and thinking about when you do this. So if I were going to like preparing a little analysis, I was going to email someone, I might figure out this number. I might type something next to it like average monthly revenue, okay? But I also might make a note that's like includes zero values. That's so you want to make your spreadsheet as repeatable as possible, but anytime you're communicating information, you always want to think about anything that's missing or messy, and you always want to make notes about it so that somebody else could go back and redo your analysis. That's what you want to be thinking about. So I might just write something here like includes zeros. That's one thing you could do. Other thing you could, yeah.
So my average monthly revenue doesn't look the same.
Okay, great.
It was
Okay, here's a little alert. Interesting. All right. So this is another common question where you have two spreadsheets and you want to be able to compare the two. So next thing I would do is look at our monthly ad revenue column here and see if those values are looking the same. So if we got 5,000 something, 28,000 something, looks like they're pretty similar. Kind of like spot checking some of these rows, right? Next thing I would do is scroll all the way down, make sure your formula went all the way to the bottom. Okay, so it looks like your formula went further down beyond where our shows end for some reason. So you got a bunch of zeros after all the shows.
okay.
And so it's averaging in a bunch more zeros
Got it.
than shows. Yeah, always something you want to look for when copy pasting your formulas. Usually the double click should work to just go down to the end of your rows, but something you want to check. Yeah. Good call out. So the other thing that I might want to do, right, is not average in my zeros, right? These, in this case, these zeros are like clearly a data error. I might want to like not include them in my average. So one way that I could do that is to kind of like filter them out of this view. Now, you'll see we applied our little filters before so that we could do our alphabetical sort, and I got these little arrows in each of my columns. This new column that I added for my formula doesn't have a little arrow, which means I cannot sort by it, which is really annoying. And what it means is if I sort by one of these other columns, everything else will move around, but these numbers will stay in the same order, which doesn't help me, right? They're gonna stay static. In this case, it's a formula, so the references, we might be okay, but it's gonna get a little messy. It's not gonna move with my sort. So what you wanna do in this case, anytime you add a column to something you've already sorted, you wanna select everything again, go back to your sort and filter. Why is it still in my recover? Let me close it. You want to select everything, do your sort and filter, and turn your filter off and back on. Just like everything else in technology, turning it off and back on again fixes that. I'm going to close this and reopen it because it's doing its weird recovery mode thing. And reopen. Copy. Man. Okay, let's try one more idea. All right. Just one more time. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, how are we doing on our sort and resort? Okay, so I will catch up to all of you now. So I'm gonna come over here. My column's missing my little sort, so I'm gonna come over here, do my sort, remove my filter, and then re-add my filter right here. And then this column will sort alongside those other columns. So now I might come in here and do sort ascending, which is gonna get all my zeros up first, and we'll see that some of my zeros are coming because the CPM is empty. Some of my zeros are coming because the downloads are empty. So I'm seeing all of these in here. Got a bunch of these actually, man. Okay, so I could come in here and filter these out by coming under my filter, and then I could uncheck my zeros here, and they're gonna be like hidden from view, okay? So they've been hidden from view, and then what I can do is I could redo my formula over here, and we'll talk more about formulas next week, but I'm just going to do equals average, grab my column, and before, oh, because it's doing the filter. Okay, what would be another good way to get this average? Maybe in this case, instead of filtering, I'll just leave them on sort, resort one more time so they're in order. Okay, so I got all my zeros back in here. So another option that I could do is I can look for my zeros, go look to where my numbers actually start. So this really low one. I'm just going to select these and do an average here. right? So I would maybe provide two pieces of information to whoever I'm sending the sheet to. I would say, here's the average including the zeros, here's the average not including the zeros. That way somebody can do what they will with that information. Anytime you're in a row with a bunch more rows below it, you can do on Mac, it's Shift Command down arrow key. On Windows, it is Control Shift down arrow key, and that'll just go down to your last row that has data in it. That's why I could select this block. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do another little just quick calculation on the side. I'm going to go over here and do my average. The formulas for Excel are all in all caps, but you actually don't need to type in all caps for them to work. That's totally up to you. Okay, so I'll come over here. I'm going to go do my Command Shift down arrow to grab that, do my closing parentheses right here, hit enter. And then I'm going to get my average, not including all those zeros. So in this case, the average is like 12,000 here, and it was 7,000 something before. Yeah, for sure. So all I'm doing here, so I'm going to do equals, type the word average, do an opening parentheses, and then you're going to want to use, once you're typing a formula, it's usually best to try to use your arrow keys and stuff as much as possible. So you won't get anything funky in here. So I'm going to do my arrow keys over to my top number with that's not a zero, since I already sorted everything. From there, I'm going to do Command Shift down arrow on my keyboard. That's going to select down to my last row. And then I'm just going to hit enter on my keyboard, which will close out my formula. Okay, yeah, great question. So kind of two things you could do here. So one is you could like filter out your zeros, and you could say, I just don't want to see them in this view even, but your formula, because they still exist in that column, is still going to grab them. Great question. Yeah, so this is the formula that we did in this column. Doing our CPM formula, which was this one right here. So this is our equal, this one. Oh no, you're fine. Okay, great. We had it in the format, which is what I would add. And you select that. Yeah, so that's just really like, yeah. All right, how are we doing? Is making sense so far? All right, don't worry too much about the average formula if that's a little bit confusing. We'll do a lot more formulas next week. You guys want to come back for formulas next week? Okay, cool. So messy or missing. So missing data, that's one of the biggest things that you'll see. It's something you always want to look for. It's something you always want to maybe summarize. We'll talk about some different tools for summarizing it later. There's a way to sort of show how many of the values are zero or how many of the values are blank. We can do a little summary in a pivot table, which is something we'll cover in a future week. Okay, those are stuff that was messy or missing. The other big piece that was messy that we got was our advertising campaigns, right? So all of the dates being repeated all those times, that's, I would say, a form of messy data. That's something that we cleaned up. Okay, second question. So sort of the larger project that we're like building towards in this workshop is going to be to do a more advanced analysis of advertising performance of all these different ad campaigns on a bunch of different shows, right? Again, all fictional, but just to give you guys sort of an idea of how that might work. So what are some other pieces of information that you might want to do that analysis with? The information that we have right now are these shows, their CPM, this one campaign. What other information might we want to be able to analyze how these shows are doing on ad performance?
Maybe how many conversions?
Great. So from the campaign that they did, how many conversions did they have to purchase? So whoever listened to the campaign, how many people went and clicked on the website or used the promo code? Great idea, conversions. Any other ideas on other stuff we might want to see in our data set? Yeah.
Maybe something like,
Okay, say more about that time.
something like maybe like a couple of months, like January, February, March, April, there could be a certain trend there for where there might be more downloads in certain types of months than others.
Okay, great. So we could be looking at seasons, right? That could be something to look at. Our true crime and paranormal podcasts usually get more downloads in October, November, September type of time frame, for example. So we might want to look at some of those trends. We might want to look at when more campaigns are running. Advertisers typically run more campaigns in the fourth quarter of the year, leading up to all the various winter holidays. So that might be something we want to look at. Okay, so lots of other pieces of information we might want, which is good to know. So when you're doing any form of kind of work with Excel, data analysis, anything like this, you often will be given some spreadsheet, some piece of information from somebody, they've exported something, sent you a link, whatever. One of the most kind of things one of the things that I think separates most sort of entry-level data analysis from thinking a little bit bigger, a little bit more advanced kind of moving a little bit more forward in your career is to be able to look at a data set like this and say, okay, in order to answer the questions that I have, what other information would I want? And how do I go get it and join it together, right? So maybe I want more information about conversions on past campaigns, or I want, maybe I want to do a little bit with the dates here. I could extract the month from the date so I could sort them all by all the ones that happened in January, February, March, right? So some of that is a manipulation I'm going to be able to do by myself. Some of it is other data sets that I might need to join on. We'll talk about this more next week, but the other kind of important concept for joining things is to be able to have some sort of unique identifier. So in this case, we checked our podcast title. We know there's no duplicate, so we could use the title as a unique identifier for each show. So let's say I get another download that has all the shows and their conversion rates for each campaign. As long as the titles are like spelled the same, capitalized the same, all of that, I can match them to these titles using some of the tools we'll talk about next week. We always want to have one column that's going to be an exact match. There's lots of cases where like title, you might have duplicate names, or like the same email is running a bunch of different podcasts, something like that. So that's where you want to have a unique identifier, which in this file we already had. It's just a number, right? But there's no repeats of this number. So that's a unique identifier. If I got another file that was like show 62 and then their conversion rate, because I know that that's a unique identifier, I can use that to join together information. So that's something else that you want to look for when you're combining information. And that's what we'll talk about more next week. Okay, cool. All right, great. This class doesn't have any homework, obviously, but if it did, your homework would be to practice. So what I would recommend is just like make a spreadsheet that's maybe something you haven't made a spreadsheet of before. Something that I think is a fun way to practice is to find or create some data just about yourself. A bunch of different apps or online services you use have data you can download. So if you go to your debit card website or your bank, you can usually download all your transaction data. If you're searching for internships right now, if you're organizing your Beanie Baby collection, I'm a millennial, so I had Beanie Babies. I don't know if you guys know what those are. You can organize something like that. You can also download your data from, if you have a Spotify account, if you have a Netflix account, you can request a download of your listening or watching history. If you choose to do so. I personally maybe don't want to download my Netflix history because I don't want to see how many hours are on there, but up to you. Those services have like requests. You can go in and request. They usually take a few days to get back to you, but those are kind of fun. Other apps you use, if you use any like workout apps or health apps, anything like that, they often have data you can download. I would recommend just downloading some data from one of those and try it out. Try some of the tools that we just used here. You could try a formula, try out kind of sorting it, looking for any missing information, all that type of stuff. All right, and then our upcoming sessions. So for the next 4 weeks, we're going to dive into some more of kind of technical details, and we'll keep using this kind of podcast advertising use case as an example. So we'll go through all these different topics, but using that as sort of a case study. So we'll get into a bunch more of kind of formulas and formatting options that you can do next week. We'll do some more advanced formulas the following week. We'll get into more visual charts, tables, different ways to organize your information week 4, and then week 5 will be sort of a like capstone session where we'll put together everything from the past 4 weeks into a cool kind of dashboard view with a bunch of charts pulling from a bunch of different pieces of information all in your spreadsheet. So that's what's coming up next. I also would recommend a couple of Excel kind of learning tools. Like I said, in this class, I'm going to cover some technical stuff, but also some kind of strategy around how to think about using spreadsheets. For more like specific technical tips, an account I really like is Miss Excel. If you're on Instagram or TikTok, she does Instagram video kind of it's like music and an Excel tip all in one. I can't think of a more fun way to learn Excel, so I think those are pretty fun. PolicyViz is another great site that's a little more focused on kind of like public sector type of data, but has some really good stuff about how to visualize, how to think about it, and the strategy, which is super interesting. And then just for looking up formulas, a lot of using formulas in Excel is just Googling, and ExcelJet is usually one of the places that I end up with when you're Googling for formulas. You can do stuff like, how do I do an average in Excel? And just to remember like what the formula is. That's a common one that you'll end up with there too. So I encourage you to sort of subscribe to some of those or surf around on those just to start to get a sense of what's possible with Excel. You don't need to memorize every formula, but if you know the types of things you can do, you can Google it when you need it. And that's how most people use Excel. All right, we're not quite at 6, but that's all I had for today. So that's all I got. Thank you all for coming. I'm happy I'll hang out for a few more minutes. And if you have questions about this, if you have another spreadsheet thing you're working on, you want to talk about, if you just want to chat, let me know. I'll hang out here for a few more minutes. Otherwise, thank you all for joining.